What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Chris 2 Cents Podcast with Chris Stevens, a writer who's going to share his 2 cents with common sense. Welcome you all back. Greatly appreciate y'all coming back. Those of you who listened to the first go round, the first official episode, greatly appreciate y'all. Before I begin with today's proceedings, be sure, to subscribe to this YouTube channel and the audio component on Spreaker, which will be in the link below on the YouTube channel. But if you're already listening to this on Spreaker, you can go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ChrisStevensWrites. That's ChrisStevensWrites, and subscribe there. There are two important ways, that you can get this podcast. And once again, I greatly appreciate y'all for listening and hanging with me as always. Took a week off to kind of sort of get myself recalibrated because I have two different jobs. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. As a journalist, I've been doing this since 2002, 23 years just about. And when I think about my original goals as a sports writer, I thought about this on Friday because Friday I had a wonderful opportunity to be a color analyst on a radio broadcast for the high school basketball game of the week here in the state of Delaware. And I thought about my career up to that point, and I was like, you know what? It may not look the way I want it to look, but I've still gotten to do some pretty cool things over the course of my years in this business. And for the first time, your boy's got an award. See that there? Well, you're not going to be able to see it on the podcast. I mean, yeah, on the audio component, but on the stream, it's kind of see-through. I mean, but that's a good thing because my boss man, Kim Rashad, he put some money behind this award. So I'll read it to you. HBCU Sports Awards presented to Chris Stevens of HBCU Sports in recognition of your dedication and outstanding contributions to the inaugural event, which of course was the HBCU Sports Awards on July 27, 2024. You like me. You really like me. Seriously, though, I'm eternally grateful. This is believe it or not, this is the first award of any kind I've gotten in journalism. First award of any kind. And I don't take it for granted because this business, as fractured as it is, and I've talked to you guys before about how legacy media and tech bros have killed journalism, but there can still be a way to resurrect it if we all just sort of dial back and start pouring into independent resources, community resources in that regard. But this reminded me, along with last Friday being on the radio, that nobody's career is going to look the same as anyone else's, especially in this field, because in journalism and in sports writing, your career, if you're lucky enough to have one. I mean, I've done this as a student reporter, as a full-time sports editor at a newspaper, as a regular staff reporter, as a freelancer, contractor. I've done this in Maryland. I've done this in Delaware. I've covered. You already got. If you've missed the football story in Detroit, I might add the audio component to that as a separate podcast. But yes, I've done football games in Detroit, Michigan. I've covered championship games in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I've covered things in Delaware. It's been a journey. It's been a journey, and I wanted to talk about my career in full today because it's just been a roller coaster ride of sorts, but it's one that I don't want to get off of. I mean, I wish that I had the career of some of my idols. Like when I think about what Stephen A. Smith has done, even though he's totally just disappointed me these days with his right-wing shenanigans. When I think about how many legendary reporters like Stephen A., Mike Wilbon, Bill Rhoden, who else can I think of? Shucks, it's a lot of them. Ralph Wiley, God rest his soul, one of the originals that I started looking up to when I got into this business. These guys were known commodities in journalism. I mean, they covered Super Bowls, they covered NBA Finals, they covered World Series, they write columns. I mean, they did have radio shows, and then of course the whole ESPN talking head era started, so they got on the air that way. Ralph Wiley was one of the original sports reporters. That was I'll say this, the sports reporters was what this whole talking head thing was actually supposed to be. You know, with Ralph Wiley, with Dick Schaap, with Mike Lupica, Mitch Albom, and all of those folks. But now it's just turned into a free-for-all where anybody with a personality or a following can get on television and just say crazy stuff, whether it's an ex-athlete, whether it's a ambulance chaser of a journalist, and there aren't that many of them out there. I mean, ESPN for the most part hires legit reporters, but you Pat McAfee has a show, for crying out loud. That's all I gotta say about that. But back to my career. When I think about the twists and turns that it's taken, I wished that I had that level of success and that level of money, as I'm still scrambling along at this stage in the game. But at the end of the day, I think about how complimentary people have been towards me for what I've been able to accomplish. And I think that's something important to discuss when we start talking about how we see ourselves and how other people may see us differently. And if we knew how much people respected us or admired us, or in some cases even loved us, we probably would stop being so hard on ourselves. And that's something that I have a hard time with. Like going off of the weight loss thing. I remember when I was down to about 215 pounds, and I still was operating from a space of that 350-pound dude who was just absolutely miserable. And I think that's probably why I've had such a hard time, socializing, getting back out there, because I'm still thinking about the really big guy. And yes, I put some of that weight back on, full transparency, but I'm working on getting it back off. But I haven't gotten super bad yet. I'm still below 3 bills, well below 3 bills, thank goodness. But, I still am going to try to get back to that 225, 230 mark where I just felt like absolute wonderful. And I think, in going back to journalism, I think about how my career it didn't take off the way I wanted it to take off. Like every advisor or mentor I had in the early days said, you're going to have to start small. You're going to have to start off at some small ass podunk junction newspaper, but you build your clips, you interview well, you get on at a daily, then you get on at a major paper, then the sky's the limit. That never happened for me because I got fired from my first job, my first official full-time job. I had been freelancing for years prior to being hired by a paper in St. Mary's County, Maryland in 2007. And as a side note, if you're a Black person, you don't want to be in St. Mary's County, Maryland. Trust me. That's a whole nother series of episodes in itself. But the dude who ran that paper hated my guts and didn't mince the fact that he hated my guts. He waited until he knew that he had whatever. He pretty much psyched himself out of a sports page just to get rid of me. You know how crazy that is to say we're not just going to have a traditional sports section just because I want to fire your Black ass? But that's what happened. So, story time. Are we ready? So, it's March 31st, 2011. I will never forget this day because it was like a cruel April Fool's joke in advance. So, we have our weekly week because this is a free weekly. Like, this is how bad it was. That paper was ran so terribly they could barely give it away, and nobody was going to pay for it. So it was a free weekly, but we still got a salary, believe it or not. I still had enough to, at least have an apartment and some internet. I couldn't get cable, and I was driving a 1992 Pontiac Bonneville. So after our weekly meeting, because the paper goes out on Thursday, and then we have our little recap meeting of what happens, and then we start talking about what we're going to work on for next Thursday's newspaper, because Wednesday was the deadline. So we do all of that and do the meeting. I get ready to go out for lunch, and my editor's like, Chris, I don't think you should leave just yet. And I'm like, okay. So we go into this room. We go into the conference room away from the newsroom. And this dude is not my editor, but the dude that hates my guts, the publisher, is sitting across from me with this really sort of smirk on his face. And I'm like, this is not going to be good, is it? And then when he notices that I still don't have any fear of him, because this dude was a daddy's boy, number one. His father paid for his degree from college. His father paid his way his whole life until he died. And then I guess, after his father died, he left him some money in the will that paid his way even more. So basically, a spoiled rich brat of about 55, 56 years old. This dude literally starts stammering when he realizes that I'm not budging a fucking inch. Like, whatever you're going to do, you can do it. And you can still kiss my ass in the aftermath. So he was a bully to everybody in that newsroom and on that staff. But when he got along with me, he got alone in that room with me and my editor, he starts stammering. You don't want to do anything outside of sports. I'm like, I'm not blinking. I'm like, that's what I was hired to do, to run a sports page. He's like, well, we don't need a sports page anymore, so you're going to have to sign this. I didn't sign it. I refused. And I knew that it was I knew that I had just been fired, basically. And it was so devastating, but at the same time, it was kind of freeing, believe it or not, because I've been fired from jobs before. I told you guys about the time I got fired from this cushy PR job, which was bullshit anyway. But I went home, and I didn't want to live in St. Mary's County much longer anyway. So I literally just went home, decompressed, and I think the one thing that I regret doing out of that whole situation was shaking that dude's hand. I should have spat in it, actually. But, hindsight's 2020. That was going on 14 years ago. You can't go back and do it again. But I thought my career was over. Turns out it wasn't, because somebody that I was, friends with in college was working at a local paper back home in Delaware. And she was like, hey, we're looking for a sports reporter. Would you like to come home? Well, I wasn't going to tell her that I got fired. I was just going to say, sure, I'd love to come home. It'd be a great homecoming. Knowing good and damn well I didn't have much of a choice. So I drive there. I drive home. Actually, it's not my hometown in Wilmington, Delaware. The paper was based in Dover. So I drive there, interview well. As soon as I get back on Route 50, my car starts cutting off. And certain areas of Maryland, your car just can't, be with the foolishness. But being what it was, I got word a couple of days later that they were hiring me, and I had to, pack my shit up, and come back home. So it didn't turn out as bad as I thought it was going to be, but everything from that first job just left me very paranoid from there on out. And I was not able to really enjoy the next job. Like, literally, I have stories about that one as well. But I think I think I took maybe like a few months off, but then I realized that I was, struggling and needed to, take care of myself. And so a great friend of mine, Andre Smith, who of course now is going into business for himself as a top-notch photographer here in Delaware. He was an editor at the News Journal, which is the largest paper in Delaware. And he was like, you need to come string for us. He was like, you will get work regularly. And I was like, okay, so I can still stay in the business. So I did that for a while. And then all of a sudden, the great Gannett budget cut of 2017 happens. And it's like, okay, now what? Because now they stopped sending freelancers to every event. Now they only wanted freelancers for football. So I still had to eat other, months of the year. So I took a job at the library, man, my library life. Oh God. That's what pushed me back into journalism. I was like, I cannot do this, which is funny because libraries are the most important things in the world right now. But the branch that I worked at was just a nightmare because my manager, she was afraid of her own shadow. No disrespect to her. She's a librarian. But some of the patrons were nasty. I told y'all the story about the dude who was mad at the special needs people. It was just like, it was a mess. And then I started, thinking about creating my own lane, which is what I did with First Day Hoops Report. I cover high school basketball here in the state of Delaware, and I'm having a real good time doing that. And, then the PR job came up. My friend got me in the door there, but then that didn't work out because we both got canned because the woman that ran the place, just ego. When you realize that your VP is more popular than you, then you have to get rid of her, and then you have to get rid of her friend that you liked in the interview and that you liked in every meeting, but all of a sudden his work just wasn't good enough anymore, so he had to go too. Yeah. And then of course we come to the HBCU sports era of my career, which is right now still ongoing and still a very fun part of my career. So my career over the years has had a lot of twists and turns. Like, I'll never forget my first original therapist. She said, the way you talk about writing, you really should write a book. And I'm like, about your experiences. I'm like, nobody wants to read that shit. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, maybe I should. I still might do my memoirs, but having this podcast really helps me be able to tell a story that, saves my fingers a little bit, but I still might do it because it's something that I probably owe myself to do because I need to get back to writing books anyway. I miss writing novels. I really do. But the point of all of this, after I've given you guys a 23-year summary in about 10 minutes, is you have to be grateful for where you are and where you've been and what you've done. And you can't always look at it as being less than, because if you do that, then you'll never enjoy anything. If you look at anything you do as less than, then you'll never enjoy it. You'll never be able to look back and say, wow, this story, changed a person's life. This story helped this kid get a scholarship. This story helped bring light to a forgotten athlete or team or sport. You got it. I had to learn to stop minimizing what I've done. I had to learn to be proud of what I've done, because while I envied a lot of my, peers that have gone on to do things that, like write at, ESPN and different major newspapers and dailies and all of that. And some folks have radio shows, some folks have podcasts, other folks are, pivoted out of journalism altogether, but are still very successful. And I was still comparing myself to people instead of enjoying my journey. And that's something that I had to learn the hard way. I couldn't just sit here and say, I couldn't, what am I trying to say here? I couldn't let my own, anxieties ruin the journey and not look back on some of the things that I've done with pride, because I can say that I've written some good stuff. I've talked to some awesome people. I still do, I've done radio. I mean, goodness gracious, Chris Stevens as an analyst. Who knew? Who knew? These type of things, man. It's like, wow. No, it's not. No, I'm not super rich. No, I'm not super known. And this is the first award I've gotten in 23 years, but it's there. It's here. There's proof. I mean, you can go look for a byline by me. I mean, my name is basic as hell, so I probably should start thinking about uploading all of my past best work and putting it somewhere. But I've written thousands of stories. I mean, my byline stretches back almost 20 years professionally, more than 20 if you count my high school year. I mean, my college years. I always count my college experience. That's why I say I've been doing this since 2002. But yeah, my byline goes back to the beginning of the Iraq War, basically. Before pre-Iraq War. That's a long ass time. My name, by Chris Stevens, whether it's sports editor, whether it's staff reporter, whether it's special to whatever newspaper I was freelancing for at the time. My name is there because I was there. And the more I think about it, that's the important part. I've seen some cool stuff at the high school and college level. I've talked to some amazing athletes. I've talked to some famous old legends and all of that. I've done some of the most unique things ever. Now that I think about it, I've covered a fucking demolition derby. Like, these are some of the things that I started to think about now just as I'm talking about this. And I'm like, yeah, I need to be proud of my career. I need to be happy that I've lasted this long. I need to be happy that some people still appreciate journalism. People appreciate me for what I've been able to do. And that's been the challenge. It's just been like, yeah, I wish I did this. I wish I did that. Instead of just saying, yes, I did this. I've done that. I can still do this. I will do that. It's just been like, that was the revelation I had last week. And I'm sharing it with y'all because I have to get it. It's still my goal to have at least 1 or 2 episodes every week. So that has not changed. And this obviously counts as an episode, but yes, just talking about my career has been like, as a sports writer, it hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been wealth making. It has not been, consistent. Well, no, it's been consistent. It just hasn't been what I deemed it to be legendary. But at the same time, I have to still deem it a success because I'm still here. And I love being here. Like, doing everything doing everything I'm doing for HBCU sports. I'm so excited. You can tell I'm actually amped about this. Maybe my original therapist was right. I do light up when I talk about this. But when I think about what I'm doing with HBCU sports, what I'm doing with First Day Hoops Report, what I'm doing with this podcast, it's pretty damn close to what I imagined my career would be, is that I would still be able to write and still be able to have different ways to reach people. And I count this as a way to reach people. When I start talking about things like music, sports, sex, dating, the world at large. I'm fortunate, man. I really am. And I really got to start looking at it like that. Yes, I would like to be better off, financially. Yes, I would like to be better known and admired and more awards, but what I have is what I have. And what I have ain't that damn bad, honestly. I mean, like I said, instead of just thinking about what I didn't do, I need to look back on what I've done with pride. And I'm proud of my career. No one can say that, I've fudged the story. No one can say that I've made up shit. No one can say that I'm not that I'm one of these, ambulance chasers, that this dude is a real journalist. And that to me probably is worth more than any amount of money, because my integrity still matters to me in this business. I mean, some people, they might, veer off the path a little bit. Other people get in this with no integrity at all. And you can tell by the way some of these folks talk, some of the things they write, some of the things they say. That'll never be me. I got in this to report, inform, educate, some cases entertain, but mostly report, inform, and educate. And I've been able to do that at will, and do it pretty well for more than half of my life. And I'm eternally grateful. Any job that I've had, anyone that I've, interviewed, anybody that I've done a feature on, any athlete that has performed well and has been, cool enough to talk to me after the game, and coaches as well. It's been hundreds of thousands, names that I've forgotten, people, so many I can't count. But if I go back and look through the archives of my career, I'll look back on some things and smile, because that's the beauty of it. I've achieved a lot, and I need to start acting like I've achieved a lot. And that's going to be my next big thing, aside from other stuff. But being better towards, again, stop being hard on myself and accept the flowers that people want to give me, that people do cheer for me. People do consume my stuff and say, wow, this is really good. Parents still, say, hey, Chris, you cover our kids fairly. We appreciate you. Who am I to complain about it? Because that's really all this is. It's just being truthful, being consistent, being active, being accurate, and being there. And thank goodness, after 23 years, I'm still here. And that's going to do it for this edition of Chris's 2 Cents. Greatly appreciate your time as always. Once again, contact information will be in the description below for either the YouTube show or the audio podcast. Would prefer you guys start listening to the Spreaker thing a little bit more, because I get paid from that. So the more Spreaker listens I get, the more money I get. And that matters in this world, but as well as being able to, talk to you guys every week. So thank y'all for watching and listening until the next time we speak, which probably be later this week. Not sure what I'm going to talk about, but I know I have something to talk about. Till that time, y'all be good or be good at it. We out.